Hi everyone, so I'm going to talk you through our tasks for today and we're going to go through them step by step. So let's have a look at what the main video has asked us to do. So the first thing we're going to do is we need to look at whether a letter is a formal letter or an informal letter. So the best way to do this is to make sure you have in front of you all the things that make up a formal letter, so all the features of a formal letter and all the features of an informal letter. So what we can do is we can write out in a table each of the features of each type of letter, and you can find my example on the class page for you to use. So let's have a look. Okay, hopefully you can see in front of you my list, and my list has got all of the features of a formal letter in red and all of the features of an informal letter in blue. So let's recap our features. For the formal letter, there needs to be the address of the person who sent it and the address of the person who is receiving the letter. So 2 addresses. There needs to be a date. It needs to start with dear sir or madam, or using the name of a person, but it needs to be their full name. So their first name and their surname. It has an introduction, and in that bit, it states the purpose of the letter, so why someone is writing the letter. Then there's the main body of the letter, the conclusion, and then at the end of the letter, it's signed off with yours sincerely or yours faithfully. So those are all the features of our formal letters. Our informal letter has just got the sender's address. So your address, the person who's writing it. It tends to start with dear or hello or hi. It's got the date, an introduction, main body, and then it signs off love or from. So I'm going to use my highlighters that I've got here, and I'm going to highlight the things that are different between the formal and the informal letter. So the first thing I'm going to highlight are the different types of address, because an informal letter only has the sender's address, whereas the formal letter has your address and their address. So when I'm identifying my letters, that's going to be a key thing that I can look out for. I'm also going to highlight the way that the letters start with dear or hello or hi, because in an informal letter, that's how they start. But it's different in a formal letter because that has dear, sir, madam, or the full name. I'm not going to highlight the date because they've both got a date. I'm not going to highlight the introduction because they both have an introduction. I'm not going to highlight the main body of the letter because they've both got that. But I think I will highlight the way that they end. So love and from for an informal letter, or yours sincerely or yours faithfully for a formal letter. So now that I have identified what is different between a formal letter and an informal letter, this should be able to help us to be able to identify which type each of the letters in our task is. So you can find a copy of this on the class page and that might help you. So let's have a look, shall we? Let's see if we are able to identify our different types of letters in our PowerPoint using what we have just written down. So this is our first letter here. I'm looking at this letter now and I'm referring back to my sheet here where I know the differences between a formal and an informal letter. And I want to identify which one it is. So the first thing we looked at is the address, didn't we? We said that on a formal letter, it's got 2 addresses, and on an informal, it only has 1. So let's look at this letter. I can see we've got the address of a Mr. and Mrs. Jones here. And then over here, I can see we've got the address of McDonald's. So it's got 2 addresses on it. One of the person who's written the letter, the Jones family, and one of the receiver of the letter, because this letter is writing to McDonald's. Another thing on our list that we wrote that was different was the way a letter finishes. An informal letter says love or from, and a formal letter has yours sincerely or yours faithfully. It uses the word yours. So let's have a look at the end of this one. Oh yes, we can see, look here, the letter ends in yours. So what are we thinking? Formal or informal? I'm thinking this is a formal letter because it has both the sender and the receiver's addresses, and it ends with yours. Doesn't end with love or from. Shall we see if I'm right? Yes, fantastic, I am right. Hopefully you got that too. This is a formal letter. Fantastic. Let's have a look at one more together. Okay, so let's think about our features list again. The first thing we said was different is the address. So let's have a look. Does this letter have just the sender's address, or does it have the sender's and the receiver's address on it? I can see here it's only got the one address on it, hasn't it? It is written from Jenny. Jenny is the sender, and look, here's her name down the bottom. It's only got the sender's address on it. Another thing on our list was to look at the way that a letter ends. Do you remember? So whether it was yours sincerely, yours faithfully for a formal letter, or love and from for an informal letter. So let's look down the bottom. How is it signed off? Oh, it is signed off, love, Jenny. So this tells me that perhaps Jenny is friends, or she knows the person that she has written to. So what do we think? Just the sender's address, and it signs off with love. Formal or informal? What do you think? I think it's going to be informal because it's just got the sender's address, and it looks like Jenny knows the person she's writing to because she's written love. Let's see if I'm right. Brilliant, I am right. It's got only the sender's address and it signs off with love from Jenny. Fantastic, brilliant. So your task now is to go and look at all of the letters on the class page, and can you identify them and put them into a formal pile and an informal pile. If you haven't got a printer, you can record them in a table like is explained on the first video. So pause this video now and go and have a go at that task. Well done. Right, the next thing we are asked to do is, once we've sorted all of those letters, we're going to choose one and we're going to write a sentence to say why we know this is either a formal or an informal letter. So let's go back to one of the examples that we did earlier. Let's look at this letter from Mary. from Jenny, sorry, to Mary. How did we know that this was an informal letter? I think we knew because it only had the sender's address on it and it was signed off, Love, Jenny. So together now, I'm going to show you how to write a sentence explaining how I know that that is an informal letter. Right, I hope you can see my piece of paper. So we're thinking about our informal letter that we identified, the one that was written from Jenny to Mary. So we are going to write now that we know that was an informal letter. So I'm going to start with saying, I know this letter to Mary is informal because then I'm going to write my reasons. So I know this letter to Mary is informal because, and then my reasons were, oh yes, because there is only the sender's address. And what was our other reason? And it is signed Love, Jenny. What do I need to finish my sentence with? Full stop. Brilliant. So can you see how I've written my sentence? I know this letter to Mary is informal because, so I've said which type I think it is, informal. And I've used my conjunction because to say why. There is only the sender's address and it is signed Love, Jenny. So now what I would like you to do is choose one of the letters that you have identified and write yourself a sentence like mine that explains whether your letter you've chosen is formal or informal, and then also explain why. So pause the video now and off you go. Okay, time for our last task. If you remember, our last task is always to do a reflection, isn't it? So last task is to do a reflection. And there are always things that we think about when we do our reflection. So we need to be thinking about, what have we learned today? How is that going to help us to write our letter to our friend in Sydney? And how could we use that in our wider life? Okay, so I've got my pad again, and I'm going to just write my reflection. So what have we learnt today? We have learnt to sort letters, haven't we? We've learned to identify formal and informal letters. So I'm going to start my reflection with, I have learnt to identify formal and informal letters. And how is that going to help me to be able to write to my friend in Sydney? Well, I think being able to identify them has helped me to understand more how to write a formal or an informal letter. So I think I've got more knowledge now of how to make sure my knowledge to my new friend is an informal one. So I have learnt to identify formal and informal letters. I have improved my understanding of each letter type so I will be able to make sure I write a really good informal letter to my new friend. And then how will this help in my wider life? Well, I think now when I get letters through the post, I'm going to be able to tell whether they are likely to be letters from friends or whether they're likely to be horrible bills that I don't really want to pay, but they're going to be more formal letters. So I'm going to just add in my wider life. I will be able to identify better letters that have been sent to me. Super. So there's my reflection. I've written, I have learned to identify formal and informal letters. I have improved my understanding of each letter type, so I will be able to make sure I write a really good informal letter to my new friend. In my wider life, I will be able to identify better letters that have been sent to me. So now you can pause the video and have a go at either saying your reflection, or you can write it down if you're feeling super brilliant, or if you've got an adult around, they could write it down for you. Well done for going through all of our tasks, and I hope you now feel really confident that you understand how to identify a formal letter and an informal letter. I will see you all tomorrow. Bye.